thanks for braving the Bangalore traffic and then coming up. We have a very exciting morning in front of us. It's an honor and delight for us to be with a true legend of the industry. I was telling Tom earlier when I met him for the first time 2 days ago, how I first heard of the name Akamai and what Akamai does. Way back during 9/11, those terror attacks in the US, I was looking at the CNN website for news. This was before the days of social media, no Facebook, no Twitter, only email discussion groups and websites was how we could get information from the internet. And I remember seeing the CNN website, but the URL looked very unusual. It wasn't CNN.com. It said akamai.net/cnn.com/whatever. Then I was wondering, who's this company Akamai? How come they're delivering so much web content to the whole world and all of that stuff? So that was 15 years ago. Tom, tell us what's happening today with Akamai. What's Akamai doing in content? What's happening with the internet and so on and so forth?
Well, these are pretty exciting times. We're working really hard to make the internet be fast, reliable, and secure. So we still deliver content like we did back in 2001. We often don't have our name in the domain name anymore. Pretty much it's gone to a C name kind of situation. We do a lot of video delivery, a lot of application acceleration, a lot of focus on mobile and cellular environments. We have a very fast-growing security business, which we weren't doing a lot of that back in 2001, mainly for the government, but with all the attacks that are out there, a big and fast-growing business in security.
You will notice I didn't introduce our speaker and I just jumped straight into the discussion. His bio will come out in the course of our discussion. He's also known as a billionaire professor, one of the very few rare academics who also leads a global giant in the IT space and so on. So let me ask you, what's it like to be an academic in industry? What made you switch from being one of the top computer science professors at MIT to jumping into the hustle and bustle of running a company across so many time zones and jumping into planes all over the world all the time? It's such a different world. What is it that excites the industry for an academic?
It is a very different world, not something I ever thought I would do. I always wanted to be a professor and was a professor, really liked doing that. You know, we started Akamai almost as an accident. We were doing research, you know, in the area and felt that it was a chance to actually make a difference in practice. And being a mathematician or a theoretical computer scientist, there's not a lot of opportunity to have an impact in practice anytime soon. Sometimes the ideas that are developed have an impact eventually, you know, decades later. And we tried to get other people to use the technology, but we weren't successful. And the only way we could really get it out there and start having an impact was to create a company ourselves. And so that led us to start Akamai. I never thought I would be CEO. In the early days, never wanted to be CEO. We hired very good CEOs, you know, that were experienced at it. But as time evolved and, you know, I learned more about it and, you know, spent more and more of my time, you know, in business, ultimately decided that's something that I wanted to do. I think an academic background is very useful in business. A mathematics background, a computer science background is very useful in business. But it is certainly a different lifestyle, different day-to-day challenges. I'm not proving theorems anymore. You know, there is some notion of teaching in business, some notion of communicating with employees and customers and explaining things that carries over from academics. It's helpful to be able to look at a balance sheet and pretty quickly see what's going on and see if there's, you know, flaws in logic or the numbers aren't adding up right. Those are useful skill sets, I think, in business that come from academics.
Maybe one day the story of this academic can also become a movie. How many of you have seen the movie The Man Who Knew Infinity? The story of Ramanujan, the Indian mathematician. Brilliant movie. You must see it to understand the mind of a mathematician and how they see the world. There's a very different view of a way of seeing the world. You briefly mentioned challenges a while ago. What have been the ups and downs of Akamai? We've heard about the 9/11 challenge, the economic recession, security attacks. So what are these ups and downs that you've gone through? Can you share some of the excitement, some of the challenges you've faced along the way?
Yeah, we've had a lot of challenges. It seems like a lifetime of challenges in a short time frame. You know, starting the company is a challenge. Getting a working service was a major challenge. Getting our first customer, you know, took a lot of effort. Our strategy was to go after the very top names in the internet on the basis that if we could get them to use our service, then the masses would follow. But getting the very top brands to let us deliver their content, that was a big challenge. You know, we went through, of course, the dot-com crash was a very difficult challenge. Losing Danny Lewin on 9/11 was the worst of all, you know, by far. You know, Danny was the heart and soul of the company, and to have him be killed was awful. Beyond that, you know, getting profitable was an enormous challenge. That wasn't until 2004. We almost ran out of cash, you know, before that. Growing the business, you know, getting to $1 billion in revenue was a goal for a long time. You know, we set that goal from when we had $200 million to get to $1 billion was many, many years. We missed it by a year from when the target was. The recession in 2008 and 9 was very problematic for us. You know, and now the goal is to get to $5 billion. And, you know, we've had some setbacks in the last year. Even though we're very profitable and growing at a good rate, a couple of our large customers are delivering more of the traffic themselves. And that meant, you know, our revenue growth rate is slower now than it otherwise would be. And that makes it, you know, the goal was, you know, $5 billion by the end of the decade. That's going to be a steep mountain to climb. We'll get there, but I don't know if it'll be by the end of the decade.
So what have been some of the highs then? You've very well talked about the problems, but was part of the high overcoming these problems and other kinds of highs, surprises?
Yeah, I think, you know, they're very closely related. You have really big challenges that, you know, have some decent chance of killing you. And if you survive those and you reach the goal, that's a very nice thing. You know, we did get a platform that really worked, and being mathematicians and theoreticians, that was pretty exciting because we never built anything that worked before. We did get a couple of big customers to use it, which was a huge breakthrough for us. You know, we did get profitable. We did reach $1 billion, and we'll be pretty excited when we reach $5 billion.
Tell us a bit about the hiring part of it. You know, as you grow and scale, how do you hire the right teams to manage technology, to manage scale? What happened when you cross 100, 1,000, or 10,000 people, one country, 10 countries? You know, how do people help you scale up?
It's hard, and we had a sort of a wild ride. We got the company started during the bubble, so there was a lot of cash available, and so we grew very quickly to 1,400 people. And then the bubble burst, and we had to lay off 2/3 of the people, who were all very well qualified, all our friends. We'd recruited them into the company, and that was very, very painful. And you know, we've had some fits and starts like that, especially in the early days. You know, more recently, we've been in growth mode, although this year we're growing a little more slowly than we did the last 2 years. But over the last 3 years, we've doubled our headcount. That presents challenges because we're a hard place to learn. We do things differently. It takes a year often for employees to really figure out what's going on and how to be productive. And you got to train people. And, you know, when you're doubling the size of the company in 3 years, well, now half the people are new, more or less. Have only been 2 years, and so that makes it even more important for the training. We're very global. Becoming global is very hard, and we're still in the learning process of becoming a global company. Getting decentralized decision-making, enabling and empowering teams around the world to tailor products that work, for example, here in India. In fact, we've been having that discussion while I've been in India. There's certain ways we want to change our products here to make them more appropriate for the market. And that's still a struggle for us, you know, as you have centralized product. So we're still growing up as a company to be able to do that, to have different product packages, pricing, and capabilities based on the region. Means a lot of travel, which is complicated. It means meetings in different time zones. We have development, we're in 65 cities around the world. We have development teams that are spread around the world, and it's harder. Much easier when it was all in one floor of one building in one city.
What are some of your thoughts on this whole valuation game? You know, there's big buzz in the media in the US and Silicon Valley, in Bangalore, all across India. Front page news these days in India is so-and-so company gets funded. We just had a new company join the unicorn club now, 9 companies of $1 billion valuation. So how does all this affect you as a company? Does it affect the morale inside the company? It affects the kind of technologies you choose to grow based on market sentiment? Where do you draw the line between your own internal strengths and what the market values you at?
As a startup, the valuation being high has positives. It means the stock is worth more, you're better at recruiting, you give up less control to the investors if you have a high valuation. Control of the company, I think, is very important for a startup. Generally good if you control it versus the investors. So there's a lot of positives. You create marketing buzz, you get your name in the paper. It was very helpful for us. We did have, during the bubble, a very rapid rise in valuation. We went public, and I think even still we're the 5th or 6th largest IPO boost in history. So that generates attention, free marketing, which is all good. The downside is that it's hard to keep it up and to grow from there. And as you get new employees at the high valuation, you price your options, and well, they're only going to make money if it keeps going up. And the higher it goes and the more unnatural it becomes, the harder that is. And generally when things get out of a natural ballpark, they're going to come back to reality. And we do see that every few years. You get the bubble, then you get the burst. We're seeing that now in the security space. Has been in a very big bubble. It's still in a bubble, but the air is coming out. You see a lot of the security companies having much lower valuations. When it comes down, that's very painful because your employees that had the options, they're not worth anything. You sort of have to refinance that, which gets complicated. You have morale issues. What's wrong with the company? Because its valuation is less, and in fact, nothing's wrong. The company is probably doing better than it was before, but the perception is negative because your valuation dropped. And that can, get into a spiral and go the other way. And we lived through all of that. We went through a period where very quickly we were worth $35 billion as a company. The employees, whose average age in the early days was 19 or 20, as undergraduates, all were zillionaires. They had massive tax obligations as they vested their options and held them. And then very quickly, the situation went in the opposite direction. Those that hadn't sold stock but owed big tax bills to the government were broke. The company became worth $50 million instead of $35 billion. It just was, disastrous situation. So, going through the bubble, can look nice on the way up. Coming down, extremely painful and can kill you if you're not really careful.
Serious words of advice. You mentioned earlier that it's a very difficult place to learn, or this industry is hard one to learn in. How do you innovate as a company? Many startups begin as one-trick wonders. They got a very good idea, but they can't come up with the next big idea and the next big idea after that. So how do you as Akamai build that innovation pipeline, the innovation culture, and innovation ecosystem maybe? What are some tips you can give to our audience here?
Yeah, innovation is really important for us, just as important today as it was when we started the company. I think generating the ideas is not the problem. We got a lot of very talented and very smart employees, and they've got great ideas. The challenge is making sure those ideas get oxygen, get a chance to flourish, get a chance to become products that we take to market. As you get bigger, you get bureaucracy. There's more people who can say no. You worry more about your budget and your profitability. And so you really got to fight to make sure that the wealth of innovative ideas ultimately have a chance to get out into the market. So we put a lot of mechanisms in place at Akamai. Our team in Bangalore started what we call the Wizards program, and very successful program where employees contribute ideas that'll help the company. It could be a new product, a cost savings idea, and then the employees contribute to each other's ideas, and then we have sort of like a business plan competition based on it. Ultimately, the top 10 ideas out of the last year's 650 were submitted. The top 10 are presented to senior management, and we funded most of them. They've resulted in new products for us. They've resulted in acquisitions that we've made. We also have other venues. We have a product innovation board that has a lot of the gurus in the company, and they meet every week to talk about new tech trends, new ideas. We have I'm running a program now with our head of corporate development where people that have ideas to bring in $10 million of revenue or more next year through an acquisition or through organic development can make their pitch, and we'll fund them, if we think the idea has a decent chance of success. So there's a lot of different ways, in addition to normal business, that we encourage innovation. We celebrate good ideas, even if they don't result in products sometimes. With our quarterly all-hands meeting, we'll show off one or two clever things that employees did and demonstrate it to help, encourage people to try things, to take risk, to keep innovation flourishing.
So what are some of your thoughts on founders and co-founders? You mentioned earlier that you were the founder, but you didn't want to become the CEO. So how do you juggle this whole founder, co-founder equation in a startup?
Well, I only have one experience, so not a wealth of different, startups. But, in my experience, there was Danny Lewin was a co-founder. He was my graduate student before we started the company. I found it enormously valuable to have somebody that you can bounce ideas off of, somebody that might have other ideas, diverse background, somebody you could talk to and backboard, think through ideas with. So I think my experience was very positive that way.
I have one more question for him, and then we can take a few quick comments before we go on to a panel from the audience. So if you have any comments, questions, get ready with them. My last question for you would be, what are your 3 tips to the startups in your audience? We have a whole range of product and service. How many of you have product companies? Product? Service? Okay, sort of a mix. So what's your advice to the product segment or maybe the service segment as a startup? What are 3 things based on your experience that are good lessons for them?
Well, at least in my experience, again, one company, but you need to be prepared to work very, very hard. I think in the beginning, Danny and I, it literally more than 16 hours a day, every day. One of us was always in the office, 24 by 365 for the first at least 2 years. So working hard. I think you need to have a sense of urgency because if you got a good idea, other people are going to try to copy it, and you gotta move fast. You can't wait. You got to make decisions quickly. You're going to make mistakes. You can't be afraid of that. Correct them as quickly as you can, but you got to move fast, make your mistakes, move on. In the services business, you really got to care about your customer. Do whatever it takes to make the customer happy. And maybe finally, you need to be tenacious. There's going to be a lot of stuff that goes wrong. There's going to be a lot of people tell you you can't make it. A lot of people tell you you're dead and you just don't know it. And you want to listen to them. And think, well, if they're right, okay, then you've got to do the appropriate thing. But if you listen to them and think about it and you still think you have the path to success, then you got to keep driving forward. No matter how many people tell you it's not going to work.
Round of applause, please, to Tom for a fantastic opening fireside chat.